Rochelle Gaines wasn't a superhero. She wasn't a cop, a lawyer, or a detective. She was just a tax preparer trying to help her community. But when she witnessed corruption so deep it reached from the streets to City Hall, she did something most people wouldn't dare. She fought back. And when the police came for her with violence, with lies, with everything they had, she didn't run. She recorded. She planned. She waited. And then she struck. This is the story of one ordinary woman who became extraordinary, not because she wanted to, but because her city needed her to. The brick was cold. That's what Rochelle Gaines remembers most about that night. Not the pain, though God knows there was plenty of that. Not the fear that coursed through her veins like ice water. Not even the sound of Officer Clay Rudd's voice, low and mocking, as he pressed her face harder against the rough surface of that downtown Crestwood wall.
No.
What she remembers most is the cold. Each ridge of mortar. Each grain of aged brick pressed into her cheek like a fingerprint being taken by the city itself. A record.
A mark.
A moment that would change everything. You think you're smart, don't you? Rudd's breath was hot against her ear, his hand crushing the back of her neck. You think you can just walk around the city, watching us taking notes like some kind of... Careful, Clay. That was Officer Brent Haskins, laughing somewhere behind her. She might write a bad Yelp review. They both laughed at that. Two grown men in uniform, laughing while they brutalized a woman who'd done nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. Rochelle hadn't been speeding. Hadn't been jaywalking. Hadn't been anything except black and walking and in the wrong place at the wrong time in a city that had become a hunting ground. But here's what Officers Rudd and Haskins didn't know. Here's what they couldn't have known, even as they slammed her against that wall again, even as pain exploded through her skull and the world tilted sideways. Rochelle's phone was recording. It was there in her jacket pocket, audio running, capturing every word, every grunt, every cruel laugh. And as her vision blurred and her knees threatened to give out, Rochelle Gaines made a choice. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't beg. She would survive this moment, bear witness to it, and she would make sure the world knew what was happening on the streets of Crestwood. Nothing to say? Rudd pulled her back and slammed her forward again. The brick kissed her face like a violent lover. That's what I thought. You people never have anything to say when it counts. You people. Those words would echo in Rochelle's mind for days.
Weeks.
But in that moment, she focused on one thing: staying conscious. Staying present. Because someone had to remember this. Someone had to survive to tell the truth. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Rudd released her. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall. That same wall. Her legs shaking, her vision swimming. The officers were already walking away, their duty belts jangling, their voices fading into the Crestwood night. Stay out of trouble, Haskins called over his shoulder. Next time we might not be so nice.
Nice.
Rochelle touched her face. Her fingers came away wet. Blood or tears, she couldn't tell. Didn't matter. What mattered was the phone in her pocket, still recording, still capturing the sound of their footsteps walking away. What mattered was that she was still standing.
Barely.
But standing. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and pressed a single number. A direct line that only a handful of people in Crestwood had. A line that connected straight to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is Informant 447, she whispered into the phone, her voice cracking. I need Agent Mercer. They did it. They finally did it. And I got everything. Let me take you back. Because Rochelle Gaines wasn't always an FBI informant. She wasn't always the kind of person who walked around with a target on her back. 6 months earlier, she was just Rochelle. Just a woman trying to make an honest living in an increasingly dishonest city. She'd owned her tax preparation business in Crestwood for 7 years. Gaines and Associates Tax Services, though the Associates part was aspirational. It was just her, a small office on Henderson Street, and a client list that read like a love letter to the Crestwood community. Small business owners, families, retirees, people who worked hard, paid their taxes, and tried to build something in a city that was supposed to be theirs. Rochelle knew everyone. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the corner store and always slipped her a butterscotch candy when she came by. Marcus Chun, who'd opened a beautiful little restaurant that served the best fusion food in 3 counties. The Johnsons, the Washingtons, the Rodriguezes, families with roots in Crestwood going back generations. But something had been changing. It started small. Marcus mentioned that his delivery van got towed one night, right from in front of his restaurant. The signs said no parking after 8 p.m., but Marcus swore those signs hadn't been there the week before. The towing fee was $650. The lot where they took his van? Way out on the edge of town, run by some company called Pinnacle Recovery. Mrs. Patterson got pulled over 3 times in 2 months. Each time, the officer said her taillight was out. Each time, she'd just had it fixed. Each time, another ticket, another fee, another interaction that left her shaking and afraid. The Johnson son, DeAndre, was stopped for matching a description. He was held for 6 hours. No charges filed. No apology given. Just 6 hours of his life, gone, and a fear that would live in his chest forever. 1 story might be bad luck. 2 might be coincidence. But by the time Rochelle had heard a dozen stories, 24, 50 stories, all with the same themes: police harassment, property seizures, mysterious towing incidents, fear that settled over the community like fog, she knew. This wasn't random. This was a pattern. So Rochelle did what she did best. She started documenting. She created spreadsheets. She marked addresses on maps. She tracked which officers were involved, which neighborhoods were being targeted, which properties were being seized or foreclosed. And the pattern that emerged made her blood run cold. It was all connected. The police harassment happened in specific neighborhoods. Those same neighborhoods would see a wave of towing incidents, traffic violations, property citations. People would get overwhelmed, unable to pay the mounting fees and fines. They'd sell their homes cheap, or lose them entirely. And then, like clockwork, a company called Landmark Development would swoop in and buy the properties for pennies on the dollar. Landmark Development. She'd seen that name before. On billboards promising luxury revitalization. In city council minutes. In glossy brochures about Crestwood's bright future. But Crestwood's bright future was being built on the broken backs of its current residents. That's when Rochelle made a choice. She walked into the FBI field office downtown, asked to speak to someone about public corruption, and met Agent Rebecca Mercer. Agent Mercer was everything Rochelle wasn't: tall, white, blonde, with a kind of calm authority that came from a badge and a gun. But when Rochelle laid out her spreadsheets, her maps, her documented cases, Mercer didn't dismiss her, didn't patronize her. She leaned forward and said 6 words that changed everything. "Will you help us prove it?" So Rochelle became informant 447. She kept doing what she'd been doing, documenting, tracking, watching, but now she had the FBI behind her. Now her observations mattered. Now she was building a case. But building a case meant staying quiet. Meant watching people she cared about get hurt and not being able to tell them why, not being able to say, "Hold on, help is coming." It meant isolation. It meant carrying a weight that grew heavier every day. And it meant that when Officers Rudd and Haskins finally came for her, she knew exactly why. They knew she was watching. They just didn't know she was recording. The hospital room was too bright. Rochelle lay in the bed, a bandage wrapped around her head, her face swollen and bruised. The doctor had used words like concussion and contusions and, "You're lucky it wasn't worse." But Rochelle didn't feel lucky. She felt like she'd been hit by a truck wearing a badge. Agent Mercer sat in the chair beside her bed, her face grim. "We got the recording," Mercer said quietly. "It's clear. It's damning. We can have Rudd and Haskins arrested within the hour."
No.
Rochelle's voice was hoarse. "Not yet." Mercer leaned forward. "Rochelle, they assaulted you. We have evidence. We can. If you arrest them now, you get 2 dirty cops. That's it." Rochelle shifted in the bed, ignoring the pain that shot through her skull. "But this is bigger than them. You know it is. Pike is the one running the show. Pike and whoever he's working with at Pinnacle Recovery and Landmark Development. If you move now, the rest scatter. Evidence disappears. The whole operation goes underground and starts up somewhere else. Mercer was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we use this. Rochelle gestured to her battered face. They think they won. They think they scared me into silence.
Let them think that.
Let them get comfortable. And while they're comfortable, we build the real case. That's dangerous, Rochelle. They've already shown they're willing to hurt you. They've been hurting people for years. Rochelle's voice hardened. I'm just the first one who got it on tape. How many others? Agent Mercer. How many Mrs. Pattersons and Marcus Chens and DeAndre Johnsons have they crushed? How many families have lost everything while we've been building a case? The silence in that hospital room was heavy with truth. I need you to trust me, Rochelle continued. I need you to let me do this.
Because I've seen something.
Something I haven't told you about yet. She reached for her phone on the bedside table, wincing at the movement. Her fingers moved across the screen, and then she turned it toward Mercer. What am I looking at? Mercer asked. A video. Posted on a private social media group that I managed to access. Watch. The video showed Officer Sergeant Vance Pike, the man who ran the patrol division, standing in what looked like a basement or garage. And on the wall behind him, dozens of Polaroid photos. No, not photos. Screenshots from videos. Each one showing a person being harassed, arrested, or assaulted. Each one captioned with a date and a dollar amount. Pike was speaking to someone off camera, his voice full of pride. This is our wall book. Every hit. Every score. Robert's here, he pointed to one photo. Generated $3,200 in towing and storage fees. The Garcia property. Another photo. Foreclosed last week. Landmark picked it up for 60 cents on the dollar. We're changing the city, boys. One arrest at a time. The video ended. Mercer's face had gone pale. Where did you get this? Someone sent it to me anonymously. Someone in the department who's sick of what's happening. I don't know who. But Pike and his crew, they're documenting everything. They're proud of it. They have a whole archive of their crimes. Agent Mercer. Videos, photos, records. And if we're smart, they're going to hand it all to us. Mercer stood, pacing the small hospital room. This changes things. This changes everything. But Rochelle, she turned back. If we're going to do this, if we're going to take down the whole operation, you're going to be in more danger than ever. They'll come after you harder. They'll do exactly what I need them to do. Rochelle's voice was steady. They'll make mistakes. They'll get arrogant. And we'll catch every single one. She looked at the window, at the lights of Crestwood twinkling in the distance. Her city. Her home. A place being devoured by corruption from the inside. I didn't start this fight, Rochelle said quietly. But I'm damn sure going to finish it. 3 days later, Rochelle was released from the hospital. Agent Mercer drove her home personally, though Rochelle suspected it was less about kindness and more about security. The FBI was watching her now, protecting her, but also needing her. She was the key to everything. Her apartment felt different when she walked in. Smaller. Like the world had expanded in her absence, and this space couldn't quite contain who she was becoming. She dropped her bag on the couch and walked to her office, the second bedroom she'd converted into her workspace. The walls were covered with her research. Maps of Crestwood with colored pins marking incidents. Spreadsheets tracking patterns. Timelines showing the correlation between police harassment and property acquisitions. And in the center of it all, a photograph of that wall. The brick wall downtown where Rudd had smashed her face. She'd taken the photo weeks ago, never imagining she'd become part of its story. Rochelle sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Her email inbox was flooded. Most of it was from clients, worried because she'd been unreachable. But there were other messages too. Anonymous ones. Threatening ones. Stay quiet if you know what's good for you. Accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. You don't know who you're dealing with. But they were wrong. She knew exactly who she was dealing with. And more importantly, she knew what she had to do. Rochelle pulled up the recording from that night. She'd listened to it 100 times already, but she needed to hear it again. Needed to remember why she was doing this. Rudd's voice came through her speakers. You think you're smart, don't you? The sound of impact. Her own small gasp of pain. Haskins laughing. She might write a bad Yelp review. More laughter. More cruelty. The sound of power without accountability, violence without consequence. And then her own voice, small but unbroken. This is Informant 447. I need Agent Mercer.
They did it.
They finally did it. And I got everything. Rochelle closed her eyes. They had broken her body against that wall. They had marked her, hurt her, tried to make her into a warning for anyone else who might dare to stand up. But they had also made a mistake. They had given her proof. They had given her purpose. And they had underestimated exactly how much strength it takes to stay standing when the whole world is trying to push you down. She opened her eyes and looked at her wall of evidence. At the patterns. At the names. At the network of corruption that spread through Crestwood like cancer. Sergeant Vance Pike. Officers Clay Rudd and Brent Haskins. Pinnacle Recovery, owned by a man named Gerald Voss. Landmark Development, fronted by a woman named Patricia Keene. And behind them all, layers of complicity, of profit, of people who had decided that their wealth mattered more than other people's lives. They thought they had won. They thought the brick wall had taught her a lesson. They were right. It had. It had taught her that she was stronger than she knew, that her voice mattered, that someone had to stand up, had to bear witness, had to say, not in my city. Not anymore. Rochelle's phone buzzed. A text from Agent Mercer. You sure about this? Rochelle typed back. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Another buzz. Then let's bring them down. Rochelle stood and walked back to the window. Night had fallen over Crestwood. Somewhere out there, Sergeant Pike was planning his next move. Somewhere out there, families were going to bed afraid, wondering if tomorrow would be the day they lost everything. But somewhere out there, evidence was being gathered. Cases were being built. And the machine that had fed on fear and corruption for so long was about to discover something it hadn't counted on. It was about to discover what happened when someone refused to stay silent. When someone refused to break. When someone turned their worst moment into a weapon. Rochelle touched her face, feeling the tender bruises, the evidence of violence. The mark of that cold brick wall. They made a mistake, she whispered to her reflection in the window. They should have hit harder. Because she was still standing. And now, the real fight was about to begin. The first blow came exactly 1 week after Rochelle left the hospital. She was sitting at her desk, reviewing tax returns for the Chin family, Marcus's parents, who still trusted her even though half the neighborhood was starting to whisper, when her phone exploded with notifications. News alerts, text messages, emails, all saying the same thing in different words. Local tax preparer charged with fraud. Crestwood woman accused of stealing from clients. FBI investigates tax scam targeting vulnerable families. Rochelle's hands went numb. The phone slipped from her grip and clattered onto the desk.
No.
No, this wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But it was. She clicked on the first article, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The story was elaborate, detailed, convincing. It claimed that Rochelle Gaines had been systematically overcharging clients, filing false returns, and pocketing the difference for years. It cited anonymous sources within the police department who had been investigating her for months. It included quotes from concerned citizens who said they'd always suspected something was off about her business. And right there, in the fourth paragraph, was a quote from Sergeant Vance Pike himself. It's unfortunate when someone we trust betrays that trust. Ms. Gaines had access to the financial information of some of Crestwood's most vulnerable residents, and she allegedly exploited that access for personal gain. We take these allegations very seriously, and we're working closely with federal authorities to ensure justice is served. Rochelle read that paragraph 3 times, and with each reading, the message became clearer. This was the counterstrike. This was Pike showing her exactly what happened to people who challenged him. He couldn't silence her with violence anymore. The FBI was watching too closely, so he was doing something worse. He was destroying her reputation. her livelihood, her credibility as a witness. Who would believe a woman charged with fraud? Who would trust the testimony of someone accused of stealing from her own community? The phone rang. Rochelle jumped, her nerves shot, and grabbed it with shaking hands. Agent Mercer? I just saw the news. Mercer's voice was tight, with controlled anger. Rochelle, listen to me very carefully. This is a setup. We both know it's a setup. The charges are bogus, they won't stick, but the damage is already done. Rochelle's voice sounded hollow, even to herself. That's the point, isn't it? It doesn't matter if the charges stick. People will remember the accusation. They'll always wonder. We're going to fight this. We're going to clear your name completely. But right now, I need you to stay calm and stay safe. Don't talk to the media. Don't. Another call was coming through. Then another. And another. Rochelle looked at the screen and saw names she recognized. Clients.
Friends.
People calling either to support her or to condemn her, and right now she couldn't face either. I have to go, she whispered. Rochelle, wait. She hung up. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at her phone as it continued to light up with calls and messages. The walls of her office seemed to be closing in. All her evidence, all her documentation, all her careful work over months, it meant nothing if no one believed her. If everyone thought she was just a criminal trying to save herself by pointing fingers at the police. Pike was good.
She had to give him that.
He'd found her weakness and struck with surgical precision. But as Rochelle sat there in the gathering darkness of her office, something else began to grow alongside the fear. Anger. Pure, burning, righteous anger. They thought they could break her? They thought they could smear her name and make her disappear into shame and silence. They had forgotten something important. They had forgotten that Rochelle Gaines had already survived the worst thing they could do to her. She had survived the brick wall. She had survived having her face smashed into stone while they laughed. And if she could survive that, she could survive this. Rochelle wiped her eyes. When had she started crying? And pulled her laptop closer. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose now, with determination. If they wanted to destroy her credibility, she'd have to rebuild it. If they wanted to isolate her from her community, she'd have to reconnect. If they wanted a war, well, they'd just shown her they were afraid. And fear made people sloppy. She opened her email and began typing. To my clients, my neighbors, my community. The next morning, Rochelle stood outside her office door and took a deep breath. She'd sent her email to every client, every community leader, every person whose address she had. In it, she'd told the truth, or as much of it as she could without compromising the FBI investigation. She'd explained that she was being targeted because she'd witnessed police corruption. She'd provided documentation of her business practices, her clean record, her years of honest service. She'd asked for trust, even though she knew trust was the hardest thing to give when doubt had been planted. And now she was going to open her office and face whatever came through that door. The first person to arrive was Mrs. Patterson, the corner store owner. She was carrying a casserole dish and wearing an expression that made Rochelle's throat tight. Baby, Mrs. Patterson said, I don't know what's going on, but I know you. I've known you for 7 years. You helped me when my husband died, and I thought I'd lose the store. You helped Marcus get his business loan approved. You've been there for this community when nobody else was. She set the casserole on Rochelle's desk with a firm thunk. So, whatever they're saying about you on the news, I don't believe a word of it. And I'm not the only one. As if summoned by those words, more people began to arrive. Marcus Chun, holding a bag of food from his restaurant. The Johnsons, with their son DeAndre. The Rodriguez family. Mrs. Washington from the church. One by one they came, and one by one they told their stories. Officer Pike pulled me over 5 times last month, Mr. Rodriguez said. 5 times. Each time, he said my inspection sticker looked suspicious. Each time, he gave me a citation. My sticker is valid until next May. They towed my daughter's car from in front of our house, Mrs. Washington added. Our house. The sign said permit parking only, but those signs weren't there the day before. When I went to get her car, the lot wanted $800. $800 for one night. DeAndre spoke up, his voice quiet but steady. They stopped me because I matched a description. But they wouldn't tell me what description. They wouldn't tell me what crime. They just kept me in that room for 6 hours, asking the same questions over and over, trying to get me to confess to something I didn't do. Story after story. Harassment after harassment. A pattern of abuse so clear, so systematic, that even people who'd been afraid to speak up before couldn't stay silent anymore. I thought it was just me, Marcus said softly. I thought I'd done something wrong, that I deserved it somehow. But seeing what they're doing to you, Rochelle, trying to destroy you because you stood up, it made me realize. They're the ones who should be afraid, not us. Rochelle looked around her office at all these faces.
Her community.
Her people. The ones Pike and his crew had been systematically crushing, one by one, thinking no one would ever connect the dots. But someone had connected the dots. And now, everyone could see the picture. I can't tell you everything I know, Rochelle said carefully. Not yet. But I can tell you this. What's happening in Crestwood isn't random. It's not a few bad apples. It's a system. A system designed to push people out of their homes and their neighborhoods so that someone else can profit from our pain. She pulled out a map, a clean copy, not the one covered with FBI evidence markers, and spread it on her desk. Look. Here's where the harassment is concentrated. Here's where properties are being foreclosed. And here, she circled an area with her finger, is where Landmark Development just announced their new luxury residential project. On land that used to be our homes, our businesses, our lives. The room was silent as people studied the map, seeing their own streets, their own addresses marked in the pattern of predation. So, what do we do? DeAndre asked. How do we fight back? Rochelle met his eyes. We document everything. Every interaction with police. Every citation. Every towing incident. Every time you feel like you're being targeted. We create a record that can't be ignored or explained away. And we support each other. They want us isolated, afraid, easy to pick off one by one. We stay together. And you? Mrs. Patterson asked gently. What about you, baby? They're coming after you hard. Rochelle smiled, and it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd touched the brick and found they were harder. Let them come, she said. I'm ready. But she wasn't ready. Not for what came next. 2 days later, official charges were filed. The Crestwood Police Department, in coordination with the District Attorney's Office, formally accused Rochelle Gaines of 12 counts of fraud, 3 counts of identity theft, and 5 counts of falsifying tax documents. Each charge carried a potential prison sentence. Together, they could put her away for 20 years. Agent Mercer came to her apartment that night, her face grave. We're going to clear you, Mercer said immediately. Every single one of these charges is fabricated. We have your business records, your client testimonials, documentation of every transaction. It's all clean, Rochelle. You're clean. But Rochelle could hear the unspoken word hanging in the air. But it's going to take time. Legal processes move slowly. And in the meantime, you're going to have to live with this hanging over your head. You'll probably need to surrender for booking. There will be a bail hearing. The media will cover every moment of it. Rochelle sat down heavily on her couch. He's smart.
Pike is really smart.
He knows that even if I'm eventually cleared, the stain remains. People will always wonder. Wasn't she charged with something? Didn't she have legal trouble? It'll follow me forever. Unless we take him down so completely that no one can doubt what really happened here. Mercer leaned forward. Rochelle, we've been gathering evidence for months, but it's all circumstantial. Pattern evidence. Financial connections. It's enough to show corruption, but it's not enough to put Pike and his crew away for what they've really done. We need something concrete. Something undeniable. The wall book, Rochelle said.
Exactly.
That video you showed me, that private archive they're keeping of their crimes, that's the smoking gun. But we don't know where it is. We don't have access to it. And unless we can seize it legally, it's useless to us in court. Rochelle was quiet for a long moment. An idea was forming in her mind. A dangerous idea. A terrible idea. But maybe the only idea that would work. What if, she said slowly, they brought the evidence to us? Mercer frowned. What do you mean? Pike thinks he's won. He thinks he's destroyed my credibility, isolated me, made me radioactive. So he'll get comfortable. He'll get arrogant. And arrogant people make mistakes. Rochelle, what are you planning? Rochelle stood and walked to her window. Outside, Crestwood glittered in the darkness. Her city, still being devoured, still being crushed, but maybe, just maybe, not for much longer. I'm planning to give them exactly what they want, she said. I'm planning to make myself such an irresistible target that they can't help but come after me one more time. And when they do, when they're feeling powerful and untouchable and so sure they've beaten me, that's when we'll catch them in the act. That's insane. That's... Mercer trailed off, and Rochelle could almost hear her thinking. That might actually work, but the risk is worth it. Rochelle turned to face her. How many more families will lose their homes while we build a proper case? How many more DeAndres will be thrown in holding cells? How many more people will get their faces smashed into walls? She touched her own face, where the bruises had finally faded, but the memory remained sharp as broken glass. I didn't ask for this fight, Rochelle continued. But I'm in it now. And I'm not walking away until Pike and everyone he's working with are behind bars. So here's what we're going to do. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Rochelle would make herself visible. She'd go to community meetings, speak out about police corruption, make herself the loudest, most annoying voice Pike had to deal with. She'd be everything he'd tried to silence, defiant, unbroken, and gathering more support every day. And eventually, Pike would snap. He'd send his crew to shut her up, to intimidate her, to make an example of her one final time. But this time, the FBI would be ready. Cameras would be positioned. Agents would be close by. And every single thing Pike's crew did would be documented, recorded, and used to bring down the entire operation. The trap would be baited with Rochelle herself. You understand, Mercer said, that even with surveillance, even with agents nearby, you could get hurt. Seriously hurt. These men have already shown they're willing to use violence. I understand. Rochelle's voice was steady. But I also understand that someone has to do this. And it has to be me. I'm already in their crosshairs. I'm already the target. We might as well use that. Over the next 3 weeks, Rochelle became a ghost that haunted Pike's waking hours. She spoke at city council meetings about patterns of police harassment. She organized community gatherings where people shared their stories. She contacted local media, the ones not already in Pike's pocket, and gave interviews about systematic corruption. And with each appearance, each speech, each moment in the spotlight, she could feel the target on her back growing larger. Her phone filled with threats. Anonymous, but she knew where they came from. You're making a big mistake. Last chance to shut up and disappear. We know where you live. We know where you go. You're not safe. She forwarded every single one to Agent Mercer. More evidence. More rope for Pike to hang himself with. The community was rallying now. What had started as a trickle of support became a flood. People who'd been afraid to speak up before found courage in numbers. They created a coalition, Crestwood Citizens for Justice, and Rochelle became its reluctant face. And Pike was losing control. She could see it in the increased police presence at community meetings. In the way officers would park outside her apartment at odd hours, a clear message, "We're watching you." In the increasingly desperate attempts to discredit her, rumors, leaked evidence that the FBI quickly debunked, pressure on her remaining clients to drop her. He was cornered, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. It was Agent Mercer who noticed the pattern first. "They're following you," she said during one of their secret meetings. "Not just watching your apartment, actually following you, tracking your movements, learning your routines." "Good," Rochelle said. "Good? Rochelle, that means they're planning something."
Exactly.
"It means the trap is working. They're taking the bait." Mercer shook her head. "I hate this plan. For the record, I want you to know that I hate everything about this plan. Noted. Rochelle smiled. But we're committed now. So let's make sure we're ready for when they make their move. They chose the location carefully, a parking garage downtown, isolated enough that Pike's crew would feel comfortable making their move, but not so isolated that the FBI couldn't position agents and cameras. Rochelle established a routine. Every Thursday night, she'd park in the garage and walk to a late-night community meeting at the church 2 blocks away. Predictable, regular, easy to ambush. We'll have eyes on you the entire time, Mercer promised. Audio and video. The moment things go south, we move in. But Rochelle, she gripped Rochelle's hand, you need to give us a signal. If it gets too dangerous, if you need us to intervene immediately, you say the word mercy. That's the abort code. The second you say it, we're coming in. I won't need it, Rochelle said. Say it anyway. Promise me you'll use it if you need to. Rochelle met her eyes. I promise. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Because if Pike's crew came for her, if they brought the violence and intimidation they were famous for, Rochelle couldn't afford to stop them too soon. She needed them to condemn themselves completely, to say and do things so damning that no lawyer could explain it away. She needed them to feel powerful, untouchable, in control. And then she needed to destroy them. Thursday, November 14th. The night that would change everything. Rochelle pulled into the parking garage at 7:47 p.m., right on schedule. Her hands were steady on the wheel, but her heart was hammering. This was it. This was the moment she'd been building toward for months. Everything had led here. The brick wall, the hospital, the false charges, the community meetings. Every step had been a move in a chess game. She was playing against an opponent who thought he'd already won. She parked on the 3rd level, in the spot she always chose. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows. Her footsteps echoed as she walked toward the stairwell. She could feel the small microphone the FBI had given her, disguised as a button on her jacket. Could feel the knowledge that cameras were positioned throughout the garage, that federal agents were watching every angle. But she'd never felt more alone. The stairwell door opened above her. Footsteps. Multiple sets.
Coming down.
Rochelle's breath caught in her throat. This is it.
Stay calm.
Remember the plan. 3 men emerged from the shadows. She recognized them all. Officer Brent Haskins, who'd laughed while his partner smashed her into the wall. Officer Clay Rudd, who'd mocked her pain. And in the center, like a king with his soldiers, Sergeant Vance Pike himself. Well, Pike said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. If it isn't Crestwood's most wanted. Funny running into you here, Ms. Gaines. Is it funny? Rochelle kept her voice steady. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like harassment. Again. Pike smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Harassment? We're just concerned citizens, checking on a woman who's been making some very serious accusations. Some might say defamatory accusations. Some might say true accusations. Rochelle didn't back away. Couldn't back away. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she held her ground. Here's the thing about truth, Pike said, stepping closer. Truth is subjective. Truth is what people believe. And right now, after all those fraud charges, after all those news stories, who's going to believe a desperate woman trying to save her own skin? The evidence will speak for itself. What evidence?
Pike laughed.
You think anyone cares about your spreadsheets? Your little maps? You think that matters compared to official police reports, court documents, sworn testimony from respected officers? He was right in front of her now, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, see the absolute confidence in his eyes. You should have stayed quiet, he said softly. You should have taken your beating like everyone else and moved on. But you had to be special. You had to be a hero. And look where that got you. Where's that? Rochelle asked. Right back where you started. Alone. Powerless. About to learn the same lesson we taught you before. Pike nodded to Rudd and Haskins. Boys, I think Ms. Gaines needs a reminder about respecting law enforcement. They moved on her then, and for a moment, just a moment, Rochelle's courage faltered. She remembered the brick wall, remembered the cold, the pain, the helplessness. But then Rudd grabbed her arm, and Pike leaned in to whisper in her ear, and she remembered something else. She remembered why she was here. "You really think you're untouchable, don't you?" she said loudly, clearly, for the cameras she knew were recording. "You really think you can assault citizens, steal their property, destroy their lives, and face no consequences?" Consequences?
Pike laughed.
"Look around, sweetheart. Who's going to stop us?
You?
You're nothing. You're a fraud, a criminal, a woman with no credibility trying to bring down decorated officers. Even if you scream, even if you report this, who's going to believe you?" "Maybe no one," Rochelle said. And then she smiled. "But they'll believe the video." Pike's expression changed. Just for a second, just a flicker, she saw uncertainty cross his face. "What video?" "The one being recorded right now. By the FBI. From 6 different angles. Capturing every word you just said. Every admission. Every threat." The parking garage seemed to hold its breath. "You're bluffing," Pike said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Am I? Then why are your hands shaking?" And they were. Pike's hands, so steady and confident moments before, were trembling now. "Rudd Haskins," he snapped. "Check the federal agents. Hands where we can see them." The garage exploded with movement. FBI agents appeared from everywhere, behind cars, from stairwells, through doorways Rochelle hadn't even known were there. Agent Mercer led the charge, her weapon drawn, her voice commanding. "Sergeant Vance Pike, Officer Clay Rudd, Officer Brent Haskins, you are under arrest for assault, conspiracy, extortion, and civil rights violations. You have the right to remain silent." The world seemed to move in slow motion. Pike's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, denial, and finally, terrible understanding. Rudd tried to run and was tackled by 2 agents. Haskins just stood there, hands raised, all the fight gone out of him. And Rochelle? Rochelle stood in the center of it all, watching justice finally arrive. "Are you okay?" Agent Mercer appeared at her side, gripping her shoulder. "I'm okay." Rochelle's voice was shaking now, all the adrenaline finally crashing through her system. "Did you get it? Everything?" "We got everything. Every word, every threat, every admission. This is it, Rochelle. This is what we needed." But the night wasn't over. The arrests happened simultaneously across Crestwood. While Pike and his officers were being cuffed in the parking garage, FBI teams were executing search warrants across the city. At Pike's home, at Pinnacle Recovery's offices, at Landmark Development's corporate headquarters, and in Pike's basement, exactly where the anonymous video had shown it, they found the wall book. Not just one wall. 3 entire walls covered with Polaroids, printed screenshots, and handwritten notes documenting years of abuse. Each photo showed a victim, a person being harassed, arrested, or assaulted. Each one was labeled with a date and a dollar amount. Garcia family, $12,400 in fees and fines. Property foreclosed 6/15. Landmark purchased June 22. Chun delivery van, $650 towing. 3 additional citations equals $1,200. Subject now struggling financially. Washington vehicle, $800 impound. Subject forced to choose between car and rent. On and on. Hundreds of photos. Hundreds of victims. A systematic catalog of cruelty and corruption. But it wasn't just photos. Pike had kept records. Spreadsheets showing how much money the towing company had generated. Contracts between Pinnacle Recovery and Landmark Development. Email chains showing coordination between the police department and the developers. Bank statements showing payments flowing from Landmark to Pike's personal accounts. It was all there. Every piece of the puzzle. The complete anatomy of corruption. Gerald Voss, owner of Pinnacle Recovery, was arrested at his home in the suburbs. Patricia Keene, CEO of Landmark Development, was taken into custody at her office in the middle of a meeting with investors. By midnight, the story was breaking across every news channel. The same channels that had breathlessly reported Rochelle's fraud charges were now showing footage of the arrests, images of the wall book, interviews with victims who'd been afraid to speak up until now. The narrative had flipped completely. Rochelle sat in Agent Mercer's office at the FBI field headquarters, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, watching the news coverage on the TV in the corner. Stunning revelations of systematic corruption within the Crestwood Police Department. Federal charges against multiple officers, a towing company owner, and real estate developers. Victims coming forward with stories of harassment, theft, and civil rights violations spanning years. And there, on the screen, was a photo of Rochelle herself. But the caption beneath it had changed. Before, it had read, "Local woman charged with fraud." Now it read, "FBI informant helps break corruption case." "How do you feel?" Agent Mercer asked softly. How did she feel? Rochelle couldn't quite name it. Exhausted. Relieved. Vindicated. Angry that it had taken so much, cost so much, risked so much just to prove what she'd known all along. "I feel like I can breathe again," she finally said. Her phone, her personal phone, not the FBI-issued one, buzzed with a message. Then another. And another. She looked at the screen and felt tears prick her eyes. Messages from Mrs. Patterson. "I knew you were telling the truth. I always knew." From Marcus. "Thank you for not giving up on us." From DeAndre. "You saved us. You saved all of us." From dozens of people across Crestwood, the community she'd fought for, the people she'd risked everything to protect. "The fraud charges against you will be dropped tomorrow," Mercer said. "Formally dismissed with prejudice, which means they can never be refiled. We'll make sure every news outlet covers it as prominently as they covered the original charges. Your name will be cleared completely." And Pike? The others? Going away for a long time. Conspiracy, civil rights violations, extortion, assault. We have so much evidence that their own lawyers are already talking about plea deals. Voss and Keene are facing federal racketeering charges. This is going to result in one of the largest police corruption prosecutions in state history. Rochelle nodded slowly. It was what she'd fought for, what she'd suffered for. But it didn't erase the brick wall. Didn't erase the fear, the pain, the months of isolation and attack. "When can I go home?" she asked. "Whenever you want." Though. Mercer hesitated. "Media is camped outside your apartment. Everyone wants to interview you, hear your story. You're about to become very famous, Rochelle. A hero." "I'm not a hero." Rochelle's voice was firm. "I'm just someone who did what needed to be done. What anyone should have done. But most people wouldn't have. Most people would have stayed quiet, taken the beating, and tried to move on. You fought back. You stood up. That matters." Maybe it did. Maybe that was the lesson of the brick wall after all. Not that you could be broken, but that you could choose to remain unbroken. That you could take the worst moment of your life and transform it into something that mattered. "I think," Rochelle said slowly, "I'd like to make a statement. To the press. To everyone. Is that possible?" Mercer smiled. "I'll set it up." 3 days later, Rochelle stood in front of a bank of microphones outside the federal building. Behind her were Agent Mercer and other FBI officials. To her sides were members of her community, Mrs. Patterson, Marcus, DeAndre, the Johnsons, the Rodriguez family. People who'd stood by her. People who'd found their voices because she'd found hers. The cameras were rolling. The whole city was watching. Rochelle took a deep breath and began to speak. "My name is Rochelle Gaines, and 2 months ago, police officers smashed my face into a brick wall." The crowd went silent. They did it because I was watching them, because I was documenting their abuse, because I dared to ask questions about what was happening in our city. They did it to silence me, to make an example of me, to show everyone else what happens when you stand up to power. She paused, gathering her thoughts. For a while, I thought they'd succeeded. They charged me with crimes I didn't commit. They tried to destroy my reputation. They isolated me from my community and made me question whether fighting back was worth the cost. Another pause. Mrs. Patterson reached out and squeezed her hand. But here's what they didn't understand. Here's what people like Sergeant Pike and his crew will never understand.
You can hurt someone. You can intimidate them.
You can make their life hell. But you can't break someone who refuses to be broken. You can't silence someone who believes their voice matters. Her voice grew stronger. The officers who assaulted me, the system that protected them, the corrupt network that profited from fear and abuse, they're all being held accountable now. But this isn't just my victory. This is a victory for every person in Crestwood who's been harassed, intimidated, or driven from their home. For every family that lost everything while a few people got rich. For every voice that was silenced because speaking up seemed too dangerous. She looked directly into the cameras. I want everyone watching this to understand something. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just a tax preparer who decided enough was enough. And if I can stand up to corruption, if I can survive what they did to me and come out the other side, then anyone can. Your voice matters. Your courage matters. You matter. Rochelle gestured to the people standing beside her. This community saved me as much as I helped them. When I was isolated and afraid, they stood by me. When the system tried to crush me, they lifted me up. That's the real power here. Not the badges and weapons that Pike used to terrorize people, but the collective strength of ordinary citizens who refuse to accept injustice. She took one more breath. To anyone out there who's being abused by people in power, who's afraid to speak up, who thinks they're alone, you're not. Document everything. Find your community. Be willing to stand up even when it's terrifying. Because the only way corruption wins is if we let fear silence us. And then, because she needed to say it, needed to put it into words. They broke my body against that brick wall. But they couldn't break what was inside me. And that's what they'll never understand. Violence can destroy a lot of things, but it can't destroy the human spirit's refusal to surrender to fear. The press conference ended to thunderous applause. 1 week later, on a cold December morning, Rochelle found herself standing in front of that brick wall downtown. She'd walked here deliberately, needing to complete the circle, needing to face this place one more time. The wall looked different in daylight. Just a wall. Just bricks and mortar, part of a building that had stood for 50 years and would stand for 50 more. But to Rochelle, it would always be more than that. It was the place where she'd been broken. And the place where she'd discovered she couldn't be broken. Not really. Not where it mattered. She reached out and touched the brick. Cold, just like she remembered. But this time, the cold didn't make her feel small or powerless. This time, it just felt like stone. Thought I might find you here. Rochelle turned. Agent Mercer was standing a few feet away, 2 coffee cups in her hands. Couldn't stay away, Rochelle admitted. Needed to see it again. Needed to. She trailed off, not sure how to explain. Reclaim it, Mercer offered, handing her one of the coffees.
Yeah.
Reclaim it. They stood there together, 2 women looking at a brick wall that had become so much more than the sum of its parts. Pike's lawyer called, Mercer said. He's taking a plea deal. 25 years, no possibility of parole. Rudd and Haskins are looking at 15 each. Voss and Keene are going to trial, but with the evidence we have, it's not looking good for them. Good, Rochelle said simply. The city council voted last night to create an independent review board for police misconduct. They're calling it Rochelle's Law. And there's talk of a federal investigation into other departments, using what we learned here as a template.
Rochelle took that in.
Her name, attached to something that might prevent other people from suffering what she'd suffered. It was more than she'd hoped for. I got a job offer, she said, from a nonprofit that works on police accountability. They want me to help train communities to document abuse, to build cases, to stand up to corruption. Are you going to take it? I don't know. Part of me just wants to go back to being a tax preparer. To have a quiet, normal life where nobody's trying to hurt me. She smiled slightly. But another part of me knows I can't. Not after everything. Too many people still need help. Too many cities still have their own version of Sergeant Pike. Whatever you decide, Mercer said 6:50 a.m. You should know you changed things. Really changed them. What you did here, the courage you showed, It's going to ripple out in ways you can't even imagine yet. A young woman approached them hesitantly. She looked college-aged, nervous, clutching her phone. "Excuse me, are you Rochelle Gaines?" Rochelle nodded. I wanted to thank you. My brother was killed by police 3 years ago. They said he was armed, said he was dangerous, but he wasn't. He was just my brother. And nobody believed us. Nobody listened. But seeing what you did, seeing how you fought back, it made me realize we could fight back too. We filed a civil suit last week. We're not giving up." The young woman's eyes were shining with tears, but also with something else. Hope. Determination. The same thing Rochelle had seen in her own eyes every morning when she looked in the mirror. "What's your name?" Rochelle asked gently. "Maya." "Maya, I'm so sorry about your brother. And I'm proud of you for fighting. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. Don't let them silence you. Your brother's life mattered. Your voice matters." Maya nodded, wiping her eyes, and then she did something unexpected. She reached out and touched the brick wall, her fingers tracing the same path Rochelle's face had taken months ago. "This is where it happened, isn't it? Where they hurt you?" "Yes." "I'm glad you came back. I'm glad you didn't let them make you afraid of this place." Maya smiled through her tears. "You turned it into something different, something powerful." After Maya left, Rochelle stood looking at the wall for a long time. The young woman was right. This place had changed. Or maybe Rochelle had changed, and that changed what the wall meant. It wasn't a monument to violence anymore. It was a monument to survival, to resistance, to the moment when one woman decided that enough was enough. "I need to do something," Rochelle said to Mercer. "Can you help me?" "Depends on what it is." "I want to put a plaque here. Something permanent. Not about me, but about what happened here. About everyone who's ever been hurt by people who were supposed to protect them. About choosing to stand up instead of staying silent." Mercer considered this. "I think I can make some calls." 3 months later, on a sunny March morning, the plaque was unveiled. A crowd gathered, community members, press, city officials who wanted to be seen on the right side of history. Mrs. Patterson stood near the front, beaming with pride. Marcus had brought food from his restaurant. DeAndre had brought his younger siblings, wanting them to see this moment. Agent Mercer gave a speech about courage and justice. The mayor, a new mayor, elected in a special election after the corruption scandal, talked about Crestwood's commitment to reform and accountability. But it was Rochelle who pulled the cloth off the plaque. The bronze gleamed in the sunlight, mounted on the brick wall where everything had changed. The inscription was simple. On this wall, violence was met with courage. Corruption was met with truth. Fear was met with an unbreakable spirit. May all who pass this place remember, the power to change the world lies not in those who wield authority, but in those who refuse to surrender to injustice. Stand up. Speak out. You are not alone. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, and Rochelle felt something settle in her chest. Something that had been displaced since that terrible night, finally finding its way home. Peace. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of resolution. Of a story that had found its ending. After the ceremony, after the crowds had dispersed and the cameras had packed up, Rochelle stood alone one more time before the wall. She pressed her palm flat against the brick, feeling its texture, its solidity. "Thank you," she whispered. It was a strange thing to thank the place of her trauma. But this wall had taught her something invaluable. It had shown her that she was stronger than she knew. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going despite it. That one person, one voice, one refusal to stay silent could change everything. Rochelle Gaines walked away from that brick wall for the last time. She walked back into Crestwood, her city, now a little bit safer, a little bit more just because she'd refused to be broken. She walked past Mrs. Patterson's corner store, where a sign in the window read, "Proud to support Rochelle Gaines." She walked past Marcus's restaurant, where people were lined up for lunch, his business thriving now that the harassment had stopped. She walked past families and children and ordinary people living ordinary lives without fear. And as she walked, she thought about that brick wall and what it represented now. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a symbol of violence, but a testament to the human spirit's refusal to surrender. Not the place where Rochelle Gaines was broken, but the place where she discovered she never could be. The brick wall would stand for decades to come, a reminder carved in stone. When they try to silence you, speak louder. When they try to break you, stand stronger. When they think they've won, fight back. Because you matter. Your voice matters. And no amount of power, no amount of corruption, no amount of violence can ever take that away from you. Not unless you let it. And Rochelle Gaines had decided, on a cold night with her face pressed against brick, that she would never, ever let them. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the moments that define us, not because they broke us, but because they revealed what we're truly made of. This is a story about courage, community, and the unbreakable human spirit. May we all find that strength when we need it most.